Welcome to another video brought to you by RoboLabsUSA.com and FloatingCottonCandy.com. Today we're going to be talking about the latest innovation from RoboLabs in the cotton candy market, and it is a machine simply called the Artist. Now that name is chosen very specifically because unlike machines that are designed to be effective in packaging, or those like the RoboJet Floss that are designed to be entertaining by shooting massive amounts of floss into the air, the Artist is designed for what we're going to call floss art or floss artists to use. As such, it has an entirely different set of requirements to be effective for that purpose. The first of all is a great control over the speed of the floss, the density of the floss, and the ability to change floss colors quickly, because if you've seen YouTube videos, you'll realize floss art starts with the basics, people making flowers, and each layer of the flower is going to be a separate color or flavor. And then you'll see more advanced users creating characters, stuffed animals, unicorns, all kinds of things. Some held together just by the stickiness of the floss, and some where they'll actually use toothpicks or skewers in order to build creatures out of nothing more than cotton candy. Well, in order to do that, you need to be able to use smaller amounts of floss in a more controlled output and to quickly be able to change your colors and flavors to end up with these fantastical creations. Now, I am not a floss artist, so again, I'll direct you back to YouTube to look for videos on floss art. You'll see that there's just a world of possibilities, but I do know why the Floss Artist was created and how this machine serves that need and what makes it different than other cotton candy machines on the market. So I'm going to take the camera off the tripod, or at least bring it in closer for the next couple shots so I can show you what's different about this cotton candy machine than anything else on the market. Now, zooming in on the machine itself, the very first thing you're going to notice that's different than others you've seen is the teardrop shape of this floss bowl. Now, the reason for this is so that the floss artist can get their stick or straw or cone right down to the floss head and keep it perfectly level. Now, for typical cotton candy making prospects, this may not be necessary, but depending on the type of floss art you're producing, that can be pretty useful. If you don't have a teardrop shape, you only have one of two options. One is that your straw has to angle downward, so you can't get a perfectly level coverage. Or two, you need a much larger floss bowl, which is acceptable, but the advantage here is that you can have a nice, small, portable bowl, but by using the teardrop shape, still lets you get to a perfectly level insertion right above the floss head as you begin to make your creations. Now I'm going to take the floss bowl off and then zoom in on the floss head itself, because there are still a number of differences to be presented. Now, when you look at the floss head construction itself, the first thing you should realize is that everything here is metal, and not just metal, but really thick, durable. This, for example, is crafted out of a solid piece of aluminum, and instead of being like a 1/16 of an inch thick, as you find with many machines, this is about a 1/4 inch thick lid. Everything here is built to last. One of the things that helps here with the floss creation into probably the smoothest, finest, silkiest floss you've ever seen is this actual construction piece. If you notice what looks like probably ridges in the video, these are all actually channels cut into the aluminum, whereas the base of the floss bowl is smooth. And so it is those very small channels that allow the machine to extrude the finest particulate of melted sugar, which then turns into a floss that's smoother and silkier than anything else on the market. Now, the beauty of doing it this way is twofold. First of all, we're not heating the area of the floss bowl that is not intended to produce floss. Instead, as with really any commercial quality machine, the heating is done on the edges. You can't, of course, see the heating mechanism because it's built into this head, but we're not heating the entire pan, so you don't get a lot of excess burnt sugar here. In fact, if you operate it properly, you'll get zero. Instead, we're only heating the outer edge where the floss actually needs to melt and be extruded into the cotton candy. Below that, again, metal. This system here contains the fan. As with the RoboJet machines, the floss may be extruded out of the side of the floss head, but the fan actually is what drives it upward. And in this particular machine, you have a lot more control over that process as well. Now, when you look at the main control panel of the machine, you'll recognize some components, but it's quite a bit different, again, than anything else currently manufactured. On the left, you of course have a main power switch, which activates the motor and starts the floss head spinning. But what's different about the Artist is that this first dial up top actually allows you to control the motor speed. And by controlling the motor speed, you can change how fast the floss is produced, and also, because the fan is connected, how much lift you get. In other words, how high you're going to shoot the floss into the air. When it first starts up for 20 seconds, it runs at full speed, but after that, you have control over the speed, increasing or decreasing how fast the motor spins. Now, there's a standard power switch for sending voltage to the floss head. That's what melts your sugar and creates your cotton candy. But you'll notice there's another button here labeled standby. And if you look at this meter, you'll see that when I activate standby, it drops down to a preset level, usually in the 50 to 60 volt range. The purpose here is that it allows you to maintain temperature to the heating coil, keeping the entire floss head hot, but not hot enough to melt sugar and create cotton candy. So what that enables you to do is to interrupt and resume production of floss in a minimum amount of time. That's especially important because of the solid metal construction of the floss head. There's quite a bit of thermal lag. The first startup takes longer than the typical machine, but being able to quickly toggle in and out of standby mode means that you can start production much quicker and then put the machine into standby either for just a few seconds to add sugar or even a few minutes in order to sculpt and craft sugar that you've already spun, assuming that you're making some sort of a fanciful creation like a teddy bear or a unicorn, where maybe you've just made enough cotton candy to assemble some legs and you want to pause between then and going back and assembling sugar in a different color or flavor to assemble a body. So this standby function is super helpful. Now, the other dial controls the voltage that you're going to send to the heating coil. So that part operates like any good cotton candy machine will. It's the standby feature and the motor speed that are completely unique to the RoboLabs Artist. Now I'm going to cut here, zoom out, add sugar, and then show you what's different about the actual production of the floss, because all of these controls and this sophisticated head mechanism changes the way that the cotton candy actually is flossed. Now I've put the floss bowl back on, and I'm going to just pour in some regular granulated sugar. And because of the small size and the all-metal construction of the floss head, you can load it with sugar without having to power down the motor. Now, again, here you have a motor control speed, and it's best to set it at the slowest speed, but you don't actually have to stop the machine to add sugar. Given the construction, you can add as little bit as a teaspoon of sugar, or you can actually fill the bowl to capacity if you want. Again, this motor will remain stable, and so it's completely up to you to determine how much floss you need of a particular flavor or color. One of the interesting things that people use the Artist for is not actually floss art, but actually creating single servings where they want to be able to control the flavor serving to serving. In other words, a blue raspberry followed by a pink vanilla followed by any other flavor of their choice. So I'm going to let this warm up, and then I'll show you with the small amount of sugar I've added. We'll put that on a stick, and then we'll add a different flavor and just proceed from there. All right, I can see that some floss is being produced, so I'm going to take the snow control tool off and just start spinning up a little bit of it onto a stick. In this case, I'm using a yellow straw, hoping that that makes it easier to see. And I'm just making a very, very small portion, and then I'm going to put it into standby mode. And again, standby mode drops the heat so that it will stop making floss, but still keep the head warm so that I can resume production pretty quickly. Now, what I want you to be able to see, hopefully, is how incredibly smooth this floss is. To say that it is the finest, fluffiest, most tightly woven floss that you've ever seen is not an exaggeration, and is directly a function of those hundreds of little slits that were included in the floss bowl when I pulled off the lid and showed you that. Now, I am not a floss artist. I openly admit that. But let's take the machine off standby. And just add some blue raspberry. I think that's what I just added. And you'll see people that do flowers online. This is pretty common, where they'll add one layer and then another layer, and they'll put creases in it to create a petal. Now with the blue raspberry starting to floss, I'm going to hold this kind of high and hope that you can see just how narrow and controlled this stream of floss is. The reason that this is important is it allows the floss artist to put the sugar just where they want it. So for example, I'm going to try and build up a base around the white floss, but leave the tip sort of exposed in a white. Just by gently spinning, and I'm going to lift it up pretty high because again I want you to see, hopefully, this sort of jet stream of floss. And so it looks like a mini RoboJet floss, and in a sense that's sort of what it is, although some of the mechanisms of operation are different. It shoots the floss upright, but it does it in a very controlled stream so that you can put the floss exactly where you want it. So I'm leaving the tip of this white, I'm adding some blue. Now a floss artist would pause this, they put some indents to give a petal effect, and then they would add a different flavor altogether and proceed onward. I'm going to do something a little bit different. What I'm going to do is pull this off, something else floss artists would do, and show you how interesting it is in terms of its structure, that it becomes pliable but retains the surface structure. And when I say that, what I mean is this is so tightly woven that if I pull this off and decide to manipulate it, let's assume I was making a body for some animal or creature, you can see how the surface of it stays together even as I mold the shape. And I could even make this into a cone or a bowl. But again, I hope you can see that this isn't like any other floss that's sort of really loosely put together. This is woven so tight and so fine that you can almost mold with it. Now, again, I'm going to say this many times, I'm not a floss artist. I just know how to make cotton candy. So I'm just sort of horsing around here. Again, not a floss artist, this isn't art, but I'm hopefully demonstrating that you're working with floss that just isn't the same that you would have with traditional cotton candy. Now, what I'm going to do next is what I told you about, is that a lot of people use this machine actually just try to make really large servings, but they want to be able to change flavors along the way. So there's still probably a little bit of blue raspberry in here. Now, scoop that out. And now I'm just going to fill the floss head so that you can see how large of a serving you can actually make. Because you can make a big cone with this. Even though it's not designed to do it in sort of monster truck fashion, the way the RoboJet floss does. That's probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 tablespoons. I'll let it heat up for a minute. I've taken it out of standby mode, and I'll probably time lapse this because you probably don't want to watch a video of just cotton candy being flossed into one big serving. I do want to demonstrate how large a serving you can make, because that question does come up. The floss artist is going to make small bits and pieces and fashion them into creatures and structures and animals. But for the people that want a machine to be able to change from one flavor to the next, you can make a large serving with this. All right, I zoomed out and moved the tripod a little bit to give more of a view of the floss head and what's above it, because I want to make a large serving and be able to get it all to fit on screen. And hopefully give you an idea of how large a serving you could make if you wanted to do this one flavor at a time. So a rough start here, because I was trying to do 2 things at once. But we'll just see how big of a serving can we make. Now I'm putting this, by the way, I'm building this up on one of our 20-inch straws, so I only tell you that so you have a way to measure of perspective the size of this. Get out a ruler and realize this straw is 20.5 inches, 21 inches long. So again, it's like the jet floss in that it shoots the stream upward, but it's much more narrow and controlled. You're not going to lose track of it. I could, if I zoomed out further, you know, I can walk several feet away from the machine and still spool it, but for these purposes I just want to show not kind of jet floss tricks, but single serving tricks. Now there's still, you know, probably half the amount of sugar still inside of this floss head. A full floss head might be actually more than you want to put on a single stick. This is generally, even with the RoboJet floss, is as big a serving as I would make, and there's still a fair amount of sugar left in here. So I'll step behind the machine. You can see it in perspective to my size of my body. Yeah, that's a monstrous serving. At this point it gets pretty hard to actually spin the stick with one hand anyway because of the mass. But suffice it to say, people ask, well, can you still make a big serving with the artist? Even though that's not the purpose of a floss art process, the answer is quite clearly yes. You can make a really giant serving, and there's still at least 15, 20, 25% floss still left in this floss head. And yeah, this is what we're looking at. So I'll just keep spinning it, and I'm probably going to do some jump cuts here so you don't have to watch the whole thing. But I do want to see if I can get, I'm going to have to go to two-handed spinning now. It's that big. All right, we're getting close to the bottom, and as I like to say in the business, that's a lot of cotton candy. I'll hold it. So that's a 20-inch wide bowl. Also just saying that to give you a sense of perspective. And you can tell by the stream we are still definitely making cotton candy. But I can see the bowl is finally starting to get, as I like to say, just keep flossing. Put a little more on the tip, and I wanted to say it was done, but no, clearly, I assume you can see, I'm going to hold this up high so you can probably see there's still a real steady stream of floss coming out. And so this now is quite large, quite heavy. Even I don't generally make servings this big with my jet floss. So if you were to fill the floss head and you wanted to make a large serving before changing flavors, the answer is yes, you can definitely make a super large serving. I've zoomed in and repositioned the camera angle because I want you to see that the center of this bowl is not blackened with sugar. There's nothing crystallized or hardened because, again, we're not just heating the whole bottom pan as though it were sitting on a stove. We're only actually applying heat to the outer edges where you need the sugar to be melted for extrusion. As such, the machine is exceptionally clean to operate, and the idea of having to use scouring pads or pumice stones to take apart and scrub your bowl, as you find with, let's just say, machines made to a much lower quality standard. That doesn't apply here. All of your sugar is going to burn out quite cleanly. To take that to another level, you can actually sort of self-clean this simply by adding a couple of drops of water in stages, and what you'll see is that water is now being ejected into the pan itself. So that water has flushed out any leftover sugar that might have existed. And I'm going to turn this off and take the floss head off so you can see just how effective that short little simple process is. And it's not just the water, it's the construction of the floss head that allows you to get these results. All right, the screws have been loosened. The cap is still hot, but not so hot that I can't touch it. I'm going to lift it off and show you the underside. And you can see that all of these areas where the actual sugar is melted and extruded, that's as clean as you could imagine. Now I'll still rinse it underwater just in case there's a little bit of smudging. There's a teeny bit of sugar here on the outside lip, but the actual floss head itself is clean. The base plate, you wouldn't know that I ever had put sugar in this. And as long as you do this, don't let the machine cool down. Just apply a little bit of water and let the machine steam clean itself. And yeah, you'll wipe up sugar around the base, of course, things of that nature. I'm going to rinse out the floss bowl. But you see with inferior machines, the floss head, just thin metal, they're heating the whole thing like a frying pan. And you get all kinds of carbonized buildup, and you can watch endless YouTube videos or go on Facebook groups, and you find people constantly asking, you know, they'll have caked black carbonized sugar all over, and that's because they're not really designed to be good at what they do. They're just designed to be inexpensive and easy to produce. Build a machine the right way with the right heating mechanism and the right metals, and this is the end result. Not only a finer floss, not only better controls in terms of standby and motor control, but components that are going to last a lifetime and quite honestly look as the day you bought them. Okay, so to summarize, the Artist machine from RoboLabs is different than anything else on the market in a number of key features. The first is this teardrop shaped bowl, which gives you the ability to lower your sticker straw right down to the floss head without having to tilt it, so you can get a level application to start out all of your creations. Your motor speed, which is unusual to any machine, so that you can increase not only the rate of floss being produced, but you can also create more or less lift on the fly. You have a traditional on-off switch with a traditional adjustment knob for increasing the voltage to the heating system, but you also have the standby switch, which allows you to drop the voltage down to around 50 volts, usually about half of what your operating voltage is. That keeps the floss head nice and warm, but it does not produce floss. So while in my demonstration I just poured more floss right in, and by the way you can too, if you do want to completely interrupt production, maybe to work out a figure you've created, assemble a body or put parts together, you can use the standby to put it into standby mode. Compared to a traditional cotton candy machine, I do want to say the warm up and warm down process takes longer because this is solid aluminum in terms of the cap and the sidewall and the base plate. That quality of construction means it will last a lifetime. You do need to be more patient, particularly in the startup. If you're working from room temperature up to melting temperature, that is going to take a little bit longer. The chassis, solid steel. The spring set, newer than what was on the original RoboJet floss machines, is much quieter. You can hear me tapping on it, but you won't hear any spring sounds. So everything about it is designed, again, for the floss artist. And if you don't know what floss art is, again, I'm not a floss artist. Go on YouTube, just search that term. You'll find all kinds of interesting things being done by thousands of people. We aren't necessarily artists, but we know how to make a machine that has the feature set, the controls, and the durability for those that wish to be the best at what they can do. I'll reiterate one more time, there are people that do find this machine useful that are not floss artists, like myself. They just make cotton candy, and because you can fill this floss head with really as little or as much as it will hold, you can use it to make one serving at a time with a very smooth floss for people that want to offer a lot of flavors. That is one thing you can't do with a traditional horizontal output, and you certainly can't do with a RoboJet floss, is the ability to add just one serving of blue raspberry followed by a serving of an entirely different flavor. And at the end of the day, it's very easy to clean. There's 3 screws on the lid. You can literally just wipe it down with a sponge. But as long as you clean it after every day, the quality of the construction of the materials, you can keep it perfectly clean. Any questions about the new Artist machine, feel free to reach out to us through either website, and that is robolabsusa.com or floatingcottoncandy.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have that we haven't covered here in this video. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.